I don't know that we ever in this journey ever had we disagreed wholeheartedly about stuff, but no fallout, and this, mind you, with the business not really working for 3 years. So I think it was that how easy it was, and I think still is, and how I would say how little attention this relationship requires.
Yeah, I think both of us have a kind of quality in common, which is that even if we do have quite heated arguments about how something should have been done or something should be done, I wouldn't say argument, heated discussions, we should call them, about how something should be done, both of us are willing to then take it away and then think about it. And then actually, if we realize we're wrong, absolutely do 180 degrees on this and not kind of stick by what we think is to prove out. There's no kind of, neither of us have a pride in making a decision that we thought originally. I mean, other than the "I told you so" comment,
we do
both enjoy.
Yeah.
Today's episode is brought to you by Exige International. Exige is an executive search and recruitment training business that Fiona and myself have been working on for the last 19 years. We provide technology and innovation-focused executives to the insurance and wider financial services sector, with a focus on the UK and Swiss markets. If you have a search, or you'd like to discuss improving your recruitment and interviewing process, please visit our website, Exige International. Exige is spelled E-X-I-G-E. And tell the team William sent you. I'm also very happy to introduce our new sponsor, Crankhouse Coffee. Crankhouse Coffee is run by Dave Stanton, producing some of the UK's most exciting coffees, available for dispatch all over Europe. With a host of single origin and hard-to-find coffee, expertly roasted with care and attention, Crankhouse Coffee is a true gem of a business. I've been drinking this coffee for years, and I am thoroughly happy to have them as a sponsor of the show. So just head over to crankhousecoffee.co.uk, that's crankhousecoffee.co.uk, and you can use the code William to receive a special discount. Okay, well, Matt Wardle, Nick Sühr, thank you very much for joining me here today on Search of Purpose. Nick, Matt, you're from the Insurtech Casco, and we're here today to really kind of explore a bit about the topic of working together as a CEO and a CTO, building an Insurtech, and all the things in between that we can explore. So, yeah, over to you guys. Maybe you could introduce yourselves first of all and tell us a bit about Casco and your backgrounds, please.
Matt, do you want to go first?
Sure, yeah. So I am, as mentioned, Matt. My name's Matt. I'm the CTO, and we're both the founders of Casco. We started this about kind of 5 years ago. Before that, though, I had initially a startup and tech background, so development, working in a tech company in London. Then I moved to Accenture, where I got this kind of, still a bit of development, but this kind of working in a huge company with way too many people in way too many countries and way too outsourced, etc. experience, which helped me kind of learn how to run and manage these large teams. And then, Nick reached out, and I think we decided to do this. And I think he can give you a bit of an intro about how that went down.
William, first of all, thanks for taking the time and, helping us maybe, tell our story. Really excited to be here. I'm Nick. I'm Matt's co-founder. Based out of Hamburg, Germany. My background is insurance, family business in insurance, studied insurance, worked in insurance, family business, brokerage business, did some strategy consulting. And in 2014, kind of had the idea. I was 30. I was kind of, why not start something on my own? Always wanting to take over the family business and having realized a couple of years before that was not for me for different reasons. And then reached out to Matt, who We've been roommates at university. I would say we've kept in touch, but also not overly closely. But I would say, and Matt, please correct me if I'm wrong. There was a level of respect in our household dynamic where I tried to control everything, but couldn't control him. So I think that garnered a level of respect on both ends, because at the end of the day, when you're building something, it's very good that you know each other. It's very good that you like each other and that you trust each other. But it's also important that you have the same, I would say, work ethic, values, situation. And that was certainly something that we felt we had experienced in the years before. And so I reached out to him, and actually the story in a shorter sense kind of went, we didn't have we didn't approach this in a sense. Insurance is a $5 trillion dollar market. It's broken. Let's fix it. It was more, let's build a company that we want to work in long term ourselves. So we focused more on getting the dynamics of the team right, and started working with a bunch of friends, with my sister, in a kind of testing environment. So. And I think we did all the mistakes that you can do in that period, but it was more on a kind of project basis. We still were working here in Accenture, me in the consulting firm. But after this, we realized this is certainly not a great idea. We had a quote app, Quotes of Glory. It didn't make as much money as we thought. But what came out of it was we worked as a team, and I would say, inclination in the beginning was corroborated that we can trust each other, that we can lean on each other, and that we have the same, I would say, goals, aspirations with this, so we can take this to the next step. That's kind of how it all started.
So you lived together before you got married, effectively. This is the and story.
Exactly, and and I think that's actually a good point, whereby it's you kind of date, then you live together, then you get married, and then you have a child. I mean, it doesn't have to be in that setting, but it makes sense to have some form of joint journey before you glue yourself, hip to hip.
Well, I think a lot of our friends found it interesting because while we'd obviously known each other for a long time and had lived together, most people didn't know us in that part of our life. Like Nick's wife at the time didn't know us at that part of our life, so all their experience of the two of us together was essentially stag do's. And so when we said, starting a business with that guy, that doesn't he just go to nightclubs in Barcelona? I think there is a little bit more to them.
Well, this is an interesting point, because I know, honestly, that the idea of selecting your co-founder well is incredibly important to the success of the business, and also on the mind of a lot of people who are starting their companies. So, understanding each other and understanding each other's sort of way of looking at the world, I can see as being, really, really valuable. So when you decided to come together and sort of start working together, what were the things that you focused on that you kind of helped you think it was actually going to be what was going to work right between you two of you?
So I guess we kind of took it step by step, right? But I think the one thing that we did from the beginning, especially before we decided to do the jump, we were, and maybe I was, and Matt just agreed, I was very adamant about having a fixed number of working hours allocated to this project. I didn't care so much whether it was during the week or after the week. And I said, let's build this, but what this means, everyone 10 hours per week. Because I wanted to make sure, we didn't know how long things took, and we didn't know what the output would be, but it was very much about that contribution, because everyone likes to build a company in a bar, and then, but then it's, Saturday and you have a tough working week. And that actually churned out quite a few people who were very interested in the project at the time, but couldn't commit. And I think it's that commitment to the thing. And I think that is what kind of always persisted, because our journey was also not a journey of a home run. We had a lot of iterations. If I look back at our journey, it all made sense, and there was so much excitement, and it felt like each step was kind of getting closer to where we wanted to go, and that I still very much feel like that. But kind of looking from the outside in, revenue didn't come as quickly as we thought, business model didn't come as quickly as we thought, and understanding didn't come as quickly as we thought. So some people's like, why didn't you give up? And I think it's that both of us were in the same part of our life. Our 30s, we had the freedom to do it, but also the aspiration to do it, and we just kind of kept at it. Whilst I would say probably others would have given up and have.
I think it's fair to say we also found quite quickly that we knew we'd have complementary skill sets. I've always had a tech background and running teams background. Nick's always had a very business focused and insurance background, so we knew that our skill sets were complementary. But we also found quite quickly that actually we worked together both on the skill sets we assumed would be complementary, but also the others go. So I gave quite a lot of influence on what we should build as a business and how that should work. And Nick gave a lot of influence on how we should build the products and how that should work. So we actually we found that it actually worked extremely well. And probably I would say, if anything, I would actually say better than we expected.
Yep.
And what was the thing that surprised you the most about working together? What surprised you the most? That was the most difficult part of working together?
I would say the thing that surprised me the most, how not difficult it was and still is. I mean, and Matt can attest. I'm an antagonistic person. I like to take. I don't like things sweltering. I like to take things heads on. It's not that I can't help it. It's just I just go into a circular thought process, and I just need to fix stuff. So, and I felt, I don't know that we ever in this journey ever had we disagreed wholeheartedly about stuff, but no fallout, and this, mind you, with the business not really working for 3 years. So I think it was that that how easy it was, and I think still is, and how I would say how little attention this relationship requires.
Yeah, I think both of us have a kind of quality in common, which is that even if we do have quite heated arguments about how something should have been done or something should be done, I wouldn't say argument, heated discussions, we should call them, about how something should be done. Both of us are willing to then take it away and then think about it. And then actually, if we realize we're wrong, absolutely do 180 degrees on this and not kind of stick by what we think is to prove there's no kind of, that neither of us have a pride in making a decision that we thought originally. I mean, other than the "I told you so" comment,
we do
both enjoy.
Yeah. Slack snapshot. Yeah,
but I mean, so that kind of meant that most things, because we have a similar outlook on things, most things we can always find an agreement on because the goal has always been the same. So once the information is the same, everything can align again.
So I hear from that this idea that disagreement happens, but there needs to be enough humility to reconcile and be able to climb down from these sort of positions of either certainty or ego to realize that the mission is more important. And well, I'm interested to know about innovation and how that is so important to innovation, because you guys are creating something new, something that isn't certain in any way, and you're helping companies do the same thing with Casco. So I would just sort of like to know about, have you reflected on how important that is, particularly in the innovation environment, and what advice should we give to people when they're in these highly creative environments and how they get through that?
I mean, I think within innovation, it's actually the same thing. At the end of the day, it's have an opinion, have strong opinions sometimes, whether we should build a dashboard, whether we should build a feature, whether we should do something, how it should work. Validate it as much as we can against our customers, which we say as much as we can, because if you're speaking to someone, the kind of startup terms we use might always not be the most translatable thing to a business context in a traditional insurer. But then when we realize what they want, we again can change that plan immediately and quickly. Our product has been one, I think, unlike probably a lot of other companies, our product, we never built it in terms of We know exactly what we're going to build on day one. We're going to design this thing and it's perfect and no one can tell us anything different about it. This is what we're going to build for the next 3 years. And then when it's done, we'll sell it to insurers. It was never, ever like that. It was always, let's do this one thing with an insurer. We need to they want to sell this insurance policy. We need that in a database. Cool. Great. Done that part. Now they actually need to log in and see that somewhere. Oh, right. So we need to build a dashboard. It was always built very, very iterative. I suppose you could say the whole platform is built in an agile way. Always responding to demand. Even now, we barely ever will build a feature that we believe is a feature we need to build. Of course, we do around things about security and data storage and backups and all this kind of stuff. When it comes to features in terms of how a insurance renewal will work, how a second payment gets taken, how these kind of it's always from what a customer says to us. We say, okay, we've spoken to a few customers. Here's how they all think it should work. Now let's put that together, and that's how we innovate.
Yeah, and I mean, personally, I kind of having kind of started this with Matt in the 2015, 2016 innovation theater aspect of insurance technology. I personally try not to use the word innovation, simply because it creates this aspiration to be novel in every sense, which I don't care for. Novelty in itself has no value to me whatsoever. It's around, can we do something better? Can we achieve a goal better? Can we get there incrementally? And I would even say, when people say truly disruptive innovation also happens step by step. The light bulb was not invented in a big bang, but through 1,000 ways that it didn't work. And so I think this truly iterative thing, testing it again. And sometimes it's not with the customer, sometimes it's with your corporate customer, and having that curiosity. I wouldn't even say humility, just that understanding that it's, there's so many other people who know certain aspects of this better than you, and you'd be stupid not to tap into that willingly. And so I think it's that applied deployment. I like the word entrepreneurial because it also gives you the sense of resource scarcity, about trade-offs, and just having that wheel churn throughout the day, every day. I think has defined us, has made us probably the most efficient, capital efficient company in our space, because we barely had to do anything that we had to throw away afterwards.
Yeah, and I think this especially comes back to the fact that we are, in some sense, as a company, a middleman company. Our company is a middleman. We sit between insurance companies and their customers. We provide the technology that allows the interaction between the two of them. But that does mean that when it comes to innovation, we can't do anything that all parties wouldn't want. And at the end of the day, in insurance in general, when you look at what innovation really means, most of it is just make a much, much nicer experience, make a much nicer website, make it so you can do a cancellation or a claim via an app. It's not like, you could make a home insurance where you just roll a webcam through your sitting room and it takes a picture of every item in the room and does some kind of magic and says, right, you need this much cover. But how much work are you going to put in to do that versus the fact of just saying, I think I need about 10,000 cover? Probably comes to about the same thing in the end.
Yeah, I'm interested in this idea that, the reaction to the word innovation. And I do think there is a bit of innovation burnout, the concept of innovation and what it means. And because innovation is very difficult. It's creativity is very difficult. And so if we keep labeling them up in these ways, that people then become almost allergic to reaction because they associate so much failure, so much lack of ability to deliver. Maybe that's where this reaction to language comes from. And I mean, I hear in both of you that you've somehow figured out, which is very difficult for people, how to communicate between the two of you, how to get stuff done. And we're talking about language, we're talking about innovation, we're talking about entrepreneurship, these words, these themes, these meanings for us, back to what clients want. And the language you use is very important. The way that we think about the achievements we have are very important. And the way you overcome problems is through communication as well. So I can see how this is all swirling together. So maybe I'll take it away from the philosophical now, and maybe I could just focus it a bit on some of the practical. And I'd like to know, your thoughts on how you sort of manage what Casco is trying to do. So how do you manage the integration between new technology and legacy systems to achieve an outcome? Because that seems to be a really interesting challenge at the moment.
I think, I think, my view on this, and again, Nick, correct me if you have a different opinion, and this is something we chat about frequently, the concept of legacy technology. But the thing to say about legacy technology, and the key, in our mind, the key detail is that it's not bad. So people might think a legacy system is a terrible old broken thing that needs to be replaced. That's how a lot of startups view legacy. The reality is legacy systems are massive, massive, complex beasts that have been built over 30 years to do every single thing in running a corporation, essentially, running an insurance company. So this, in the context of insurance, this will obviously mean not just selling policies, but making sure the commissions are paid to all the agents, making sure that reinsurance is doable and making sure that calculations to the government are done correctly, reporting. There's a huge suite of things in there. And if one looked at that, you'd say, Christ, we're never going to build that. And we're not trying to build that. That's the reality. We're not saying we're going to do it all better, because the reality is it does so much and there's nothing wrong with what it does. Where we look at it, us and as a new technology stack and kind of innovative technology stacks, I suppose you could say, is can they do one of those things better? Or cheaper, whichever is better, which is in some sense can be better. Can it do it better? Can it do it cheaper? Can it do it quicker, more efficiently? Whatever you're looking for. And that's, I think, where platforms like ours come in, where we say, actually, we make a platform that does quite a small thing in comparison to a legacy system. And in our case, that enables the creation of these web flows and APIs to sell insurance products and kind of make that very quick and easy for everyone involved. So we can probably do that better. And so when you're the CIO of an insurer, what you're actually looking at is the choice of which technology stack is better. Does our legacy one do this really well? Does the Casco or another platform do that really well? And actually, often, as you point out, the answer is actually both. In our case, our platform is the best platform to quickly launch new insurance products, to manage these policies in. But when it actually comes to then taking that information back into their systems, we do that as well, because then they can handle, their agent commission calculations, their referral calculations, their this, their that, the other, to make sure all their systems also work. And so the two systems are completely complementary and they're not mutually exclusive.
So would you say then that getting adoption of new technology over legacy systems or in complementary is proving then that it works, that there's a point to it? Coming back to your earlier point, we don't just need novel, we need functional.
I think that's the key point. So legacy or startup, new or old, doesn't really mean anything. I think the key point, does it help? And what's the value that is being created? It could be a traditional business case. It could be, but where do we create value? And value usually comes from making it more convenient, reducing the costs, scaling it up. So there's that's really the main focus. And I would say the key point of making this work is to be both things. Three things. Number one, be able to have a level of redundancy in the system. So when Matt says we only do this one particular thing, I would say sometimes, but actually we do a whole lot. Sometimes we
do a whole number of one particular things.
Okay, but sometimes we can create almost an entire insurance company around a singular product. Right, it would be an MGA from the technical sector, because then we can insulate that entire venture, that product, from any kind of resource constraints or priorities on the internal roadmap. And we can then prove that this business, that this digital proposition, whatever that is, works, and we can drive through customers. And then we can build up the case of either expanding our horizontally, vertically, clipping off part of our backend and then using more functionality, because it's not about backend or legacy or something. It's around, how much functionality do I need if I have a customer stream of 10, 1,000, 10,000, 1 million. That's really where these things kind of come together. And so number one, you need redundancy to get things going in an independent way. You then also, though, need modularity. So that means sometimes they don't want to have a redundant system because they just want to have a front end, or they just want to have a rater, or they just want to have this one particular thing. So you need to be able to deploy your technology in a modular manner. And then it needs to be open in the sense that you don't have to recreate the wheel. For example, is payments an insurance specific problem? Hell no. E-commerce has solved the issue of payments. So you'll inject that technology. Do any of the insurance companies use payment service provider? No. They run their own billing, they run their own dunning, their own collection, and you kind of go, can they do this better as Amazon? I don't think so. So you'll, whether you use Amazon Pay or something else, but you'll then tap into that. So you tap into services that might not be, they might be horizontally perfect, and we'll kind of verticalize them for insurance. So yes, appreciate legacy because it's a whole lot of functionality that you'll never want to rebuild. And then focus on redundancy, modularity, and openness.
Thank you for that. I just want to talk a little bit more for now just about the CTO and the modern CTO, because I can imagine that when people are coming to Casco, they're looking for some leadership on technology, but they're not just coming for the technologies we already talked about, they're really coming for a product. So I'd like to kind of talk a bit about like this, the modern CTO and how they could be product orientated, and maybe just get your thoughts on that, because you've already mentioned that you're the tech guy, you're the commercial guy, but that doesn't seem to exist anymore. You've got to be both. You've got to have a commercial focus on what you're doing, right? So yeah, maybe you could just tell me a bit about your thoughts on the modern CTO and having product at the center of what you do.
Yeah, we actually, interestingly, when we kind of started giving people titles and giving people ranks and all these things, which it wasn't day one, it wasn't our first exercise, let's all get a title. But when we started doing that, we originally kind of actually thought of product as something that sat under sales, actually. So it would be kind of sales and business, and then underneath it sat product, and tech sat as a kind of somewhat separate entity in our world. And if you looked at who reported to who in an org chart, that's how it would look. But we quickly realized that actually was a mistake, because actually the person who knew the most about what we were actually building, how it actually worked, and what we were actually trying to achieve from a product was me. And the salespeople in our company, the product that was more a means to an end. It wasn't that when they spoke to clients, the client doesn't actually really mind how it worked behind the scenes. They want something to happen. They don't mind how it really does it. And actually, that meant that we have always very, very much meant that product is very much my role, what we're building. But then Nick and the sales team, they were what we would call the believable experts within our company on insurance. So they are in some sense the client of the tech side of the business, which is the product side. And the sales side is actually the client. They say, this is how I think insurance should work. This is how this works. So there's a lot of collaboration between us all on this. Constantly having meetings saying, Nick says we need this feature. We go away and design what we think is this feature. We take it back, and he says, that's not going to, you kind of built it in a very e-commerce way. It's great, but actually that's not really how an insurer will ever think about that or look at that. They'll always think of it like this. And so it's a very very fluid process, I think, between the two. One of the things I would also kind of note on that is that we, at the moment, don't sell our technology stack as a technology stack. We sell products to insurers. So we sell the ability, what it does is what we sell. We don't yet sell it itself. Now, we do look to move into that in the next couple of years, to sell the whole thing, take it to a CIO of an insurer and say, hey, here's what our product can do. Right now, we take the product teams of an insurer and say, hey, you want to do some insurance products, use our platform. And that will actually also change a bit how these things work in another type. Because of course, if you're talking to a CIO in an insurer, they will care more about bells and whistles and features and various security things, because that's what keeps them up at night. Will the data will be safe? Will it be secure? That's what they'll be thinking about. It's a very core thing. Whereas when you're talking to a product person who's just seen Lemonade do some cool thing in the States, what they're thinking about is not how the database works. They're thinking about, I want to do this cool thing.
Yes, I think adding to it, I think you need to have in an enterprise business, I think there needs to be a shared responsibility around product. It should definitely sit, within the tech, much stronger on the tech side, because you're in an enterprise setting, you have a product, but you sell solutions usually, and you need to abstract what their problem is and make sure that you're not starting to customize, that you're going the configuration route, and that you can productize that delivery. So it's very important about which way to kind of reach towards that solution. However, I would say when kind of people ask us about what makes Casco different, my answer, and that is obviously because I have more view about that part of the business, I say I'm very certain that we have a best-in-class tech stack. However, I do not know whether our tech stack is better or worse than any of our competitors. I have no idea. I'm sure that depending on what they've solved, ours is better at the things that we have seen, and theirs is better at the stuff that they have seen, and there'll be different connotations, and some will be way off. But, on the best in class, I'd say, there's pretty good tech out there. Would we see really differentiate us as a company is having product at its core within sales, within delivery, within tech, whereby we have so many discussions with junior salespeople around design a process, understand this thing, understand how this flows. This is not it's almost like a decentralized flow. It now then flows together to Matt, and sometimes I come in, but it's not like we that anyone in this company can get away without having to explain to one of our customers how to achieve their goals. And I think that is really what drives, because it's painful. You need to make sure that it's not overboardingly professional servicey, which it's not. So it's productizing that process by looking out on repeatable patterns and pattern recognition. I think that is really what sets us apart, which is why we can quote a complex proposal probably 20 times faster and more accurate, probably anyone in the market. And that allows us to spot opportunities at a lower price point, that allows us to deliver value at a lower price point, that allows us to shorten sales cycles. That has allowed us to deploy our technology, after 3 years within 25 insurance companies in 8 countries on 70 products. No one has ever done that. But I think it's not just the technology, it is having product permeate the entire company, and it's painful to teach.
So how do you, that was my question actually, do you have a set of language or questions that you use to challenge back and forth between each other that you can teach to people? How do you do that?
I think the short answer is no. That we don't have a codified language that we could write down in a manual or manifest and say, if you do these things, then everything will be peachy. I think what we do though is repetition. Matt and I have found a way to communicate, because we have communicated thousands of times around similar evolving pieces of a topic. And we have built the muscle, the memory on how to do that. And that is by, we just put in the reps. It's like, how do you get fit? You need to go to the gym and put in the reps. That weird electronic belly fat thing that I've seen on, the television, that just doesn't work. You need to put in the reps, and we needed to put in the reps as well.
I think something I would say there as well is that it really, the attitude that permeates company is the attitude that comes from the top. The culture kind of values, really, at the end of the day, you can install them, but mostly they come top down. And the fact is that Nick's role is a sales CEO, I think you could say. His main role in the company is sales. But he's, as we've kind of discussed, extremely interested in how the product works and is built. This creates a culture within the sales team that it's also required that they have a view of how the product works. They can't be these kind of salespeople you have traditionally who say, I've got no idea how this thing works, right? Like if someone says, I don't understand this thing, I'll explain it from a tech point of view. And then the expectation is within a few months of working, that they will actually understand how our platform works. We're not allowing this kind of, it's just tech guys will sort that out. So almost like we have a distributed product team, which involves kind of me running it, but and a product person who does the designs, but then the whole team, both business and tech side, are the ones deciding how a feature should work.
No, and I think that's true. And we sit down, and I think that's right. I get very impatient when someone kind of says, "Oh, that's why." It's like, but why? Well, I don't know. It's like, so you didn't question whether that was a good proposition? Would you buy it? Well, I don't know. We just went through the pricing. It's like the pricing structure is there to help you on things that it doesn't alleviate you from thinking for yourself on whether you would recommend this to the client. And I think that's kind of what permeates our company now. I think we will never be where I think we should be. I think that's just part of the game, but I think we will try, and we will invest in having these discussions. We talk a lot to each other about stuff. And we decided to recruit and educate our own talents. Now that might change. We're a 40-person company, but we're willing to deliver that education, because I don't think you can poach that easily in the market, because I haven't seen it with that many other organizations to that level.
I'm hearing from you, and I'm really quite interested in this part about is it the creative tension that needs to take place. And I can hear in you there is this acceptance of like creative tension. And in innovation there is this idea that you need to have an appropriate level of tension between control systems and creative systems. And maybe that's when I asked you the question about the language and such, maybe it's more values. Would you agree with it that if I was to say that you are promoting a culture of sort of assertive tension, that it's okay to disagree, it's okay to inquire, it's okay not to know and to challenge?
Yeah. Absolutely. And we just recently, it's funny that you mentioned that, we recently we did a 360 feedback session, and we got our fair share of feedback ourselves. And part of that feedback was that there was an argument around tactics and measures between our CEO Sergey and myself, who kind of do the thing, and that shouldn't be the case, because we should kind of show a united front in front of the people, and it would show what's the other side of unity, the other word for the contrarian for unity. And then we kind of looked at it, and I was like, I will give a conditional yes or conditional no to that assessment. Yes, it shouldn't happen that 2 people in a meeting of 8 capture that meeting and discuss something that they should bilaterally discuss by wasting 6 people's time. Absolutely, that should not happen. A very strong no, that we should not be able to argue about a case and trying to do I've seen this in consulting. You do a pre-meeting, meeting, and then you go to the board meeting, nothing is discussed anymore. Everything is already done. It's a very expensive process. So, and we communicated that to the team. It's to say, no, it is okay to argue. It is, and kind of following from that, it was then about providing feedback, because then the other side says, yeah, we want feedback, right? So it's good to argue, we want feedback. And then people, yeah, but I give an opinion, but then it's not heard. It's like, well, whether that is good or bad depends a little bit on the opinion, because it could be a great opinion or it could be a shit opinion. It depends really on the situation. So we kind of, and this is something I like from Ray Dalio principles, the believable expert, and it's to say, if you have an opinion, it's not a democratic process, not a show of hands. It's whoever is the believable expert in something, and that kind of comes from experience, etc. So if you feel that your opinion is not heard, try to make a case where you're the believable expert in something, or get some data. But at the very least, you need to be able and request a why, an understanding of why, because usually that why explanation helps even the believable expert kind of go, are you actually right? So So I think that is something that is certainly the case, and it makes people uncomfortable.
So it sounds to me like you do have a set of language pressures. Maybe it's the why. Maybe it's the why. Yeah, that's what it is.
Maybe
write
it
it down.
is. Yeah.
Somebody write this down.
Yeah, maybe you're right.
Well, I think you've highlighted a number of things there that I'd like to touch on. Is Ray Dalio's book, Principles, is a fantastic read. Particularly, Bridgewater is famed for its culture of radical honesty, radical openness, and transparency, and that comfort with discourse which can be difficult to hear. And I think if you are going to be an organization that's going to be able to react to what is happening around you at any time, you need to be honest. And honesty can hurt our feelings, can hurt this identity that we built. And maybe that, I believe the reason that innovation fails in a lot of companies is because of the failure that's inherent within innovation. To create means failure because you never get it right first time, and that's really bruising to the ego. It can cost a lot of money, and it can be really difficult for relationships. So I'm hearing from you that you maybe are comfortable with combative conversation, but always maybe perhaps. So how do you deal with that as a fallout? So if people get their feelings hurt, how have you guys dealt with that? Like the resulting feelings aspect of that. Matt, maybe you want to say as the guy who's maybe on the receiving end of the feedback.
No, I mean, I think honestly, I do think for us it does work fine. I don't think people do get their feelings that hurt over it. We're not, because generally, as I say, once people do share at some point during a conversation the same set of information about the situation at hand, in the case of discussing a product feature, it's almost certain that I have a very strong opinion how it should be built. Nick has a very strong opinion how insurers will look at it and says they will not think of it like that. Right? They do not have a clue what you're talking about. They're not a tech company. Once you have a shared understanding of these things, then it's actually the decision is made quite easily. And it's not that hard. Though I think we've tried to code. So in some sense, what we said earlier is wrong. Yes, we've tried to codify it recently with the thing that Nick said to say who's the believable expert, what to do if you didn't feel like it was heard, but you can go to the person again and ask them why. If you still don't like that reason, you can then propose an experiment you'd like to do to try and prove yourself right. So you say, actually, I'm going to go and spend, if it's from a sales, how to reach out to someone on LinkedIn, or a tech question of whether something's faster on something in Amazon Web Services than something else, go and run a 2-hour experiment if you think you can. And if you're right, we'll all happily change our tune. But I think having a process by which, the process between me and Nick has always been very different and has always just kind of, essentially, I would say, just worked. And probably why this company and why we don't have answers to say what the biggest problems we've had between us, because it has just worked. I think it's more important actually when dealing with more junior colleagues, and probably especially when more junior colleagues are dealing with either me or Nick, who are the founders of the business and things, who are not going to feel quite as comfortable challenging a approach. That they have this kind of framework by which they can then try and get their opinion more heard if they think it wasn't enough. So they don't feel like, I had a really great idea and they said no and that was it, end of conversation. They feel like there's actually a recourse, steps that can be taken if they care about it enough.
Okay. Yeah, and I would kind of add to that. I think the dynamic between Matt and I, or Saga, Matt and I, is different than to other colleagues for obvious reasons. I think from my personal journey, I would also say, how do you make sure to strike the right balance by dealing with a lot of negative feedback? So I would say, when I started out, I totally ignored not intentionally, but I certainly overlooked the costs to a team dynamic, to respect, to trust, by not just what you deliver, but also how you deliver it, who you deliver it to, in which setting do you deliver it? Do you deliver it in public? Do you deliver it in private? So I would say I've just learned through mistakes and reflection, and have people telling me, this is not okay, to kind of get better at it. I'm certainly a much more tactful person than I used to be, I'm probably also not the most tactful person on the planet by a long shot. So I'm kind of within the realm of my
level of tact.
Level of tact.
Yes.
Well, I want to be in the middle of the normal distribution of that.
I feel like one thing that Nick kind of discovered, because he came from a consultancy background where, let's say, there is a slight and a German consultancy background at that. I think there could be say there was less thoughts about people's feelings and how information was delivered. It sounded like than maybe common in a UK startup. And I think one of the things I noticed him changing was actually the realization that not only did it upset people if he approaches it in a slightly more snappy approach, let's say, but also it wastes a load of time. Because if someone goes away and is being sad and sulky and annoyed by it, that's just a lot of time gone because they're probably not being particularly productive at that point. And then you have to have a whole other meeting to deal with this thing. So actually, I think almost making process by which if anyone ends up resorting to old ways and snapping, just send them a Slack message after and say, "Oh, I'm really sorry, I got heated, but I didn't mean to. I shouldn't have spoken to you like that." And quickly resolve these things rather than just do it over, let it build up, and just assume that everything's fine.
Yeah, I think it's good. There is definitely. I mean, I work internationally, so I'm British, work in Swiss markets, in German market, French market. Culture is a big thing here, and I think you touched on that. And I don't think it's maybe a surprise for anyone to hear that maybe the Germans could be a little bit more direct in culture, and British can be a little bit more flowery at times and talk around topics. And
well, I mean, 1/3 of our office is in Latvia, so if you want to talk about directness, I mean.
Yeah, well, that is an interesting.
You are wrong. You are being stupid.
Yeah.
Actually, I wouldn't have done.
So that is an interesting point. You are an international company, like truly an international startup working across different cultures. We've talked about so the culture that you have in resolving the problems is important there. Is there anything else that you found to be helpful when you're working? I would say that we've tried to fall back in most cases to what is in general the friendliest culture, which is probably the British startup culture because it takes over from the American startup culture, and kind of try to use that as the normal company one. So it's a general framework to say that maybe it is completely acceptable in a Latvian company or to say, you're being an idiot. You're being an idiot to someone in a meeting. But as far as it doesn't really work when it crosses borders. And I think most people have kind of accepted that on all sides of things. But I do think there are cultural things where we realize we can't but we can't use one set of cultural values and assume it's the same. I think when it comes to lots of things with the Latvian team, they have a different way of thinking about things. And even things when it comes to a social thing. Initially when we started this, we had complaints that the UK office had a really amazing after-work social culture, people going for beers and things like that, and the Latvian office didn't have this. And we tried to initially kind of inject, copy and paste our UK things and just say, right, that should work in Latvia, when it never did. Because that's just not the go for a pint with all your colleagues after work thing doesn't exist particularly there. So you can't inject that into a company. So actually you have to figure out what works for them, and for them it was slightly less frequency, but much more organized events. They wanted something more like they wanted to go to a cooking class, to a this. They wanted something more, an organized social thing. That's what companies in Latvia do. So that's what they do. You can't just assume that anything works in one place works across the world. And I mean,
yeah, and I think at the end of the day, it's what I've noticed in our company, which was quite interesting. We use the word fair a lot. And it's interesting for me to see whenever new colleagues join, because I noticed that they didn't use that specific terminology before. And it's like, yeah, fair. So how much that even means, I don't know, but it has to the point where we kind of say, what's fair? What can be expected in this situation? What's the fair approach? And we do try to get back to a level of fairness, a level of transparency, and kind of say, if this decision, and we have a super transparent company in the sense of financials, compensation, anything. We report more to our employees and our colleagues than to our investors. And it all kind of comes down to transparency. And so if I were to make this decision in public, which I am, because if anyone asks, how could I explain this? And so we spend a lot of time around this, and I think it's a worthwhile investment. It takes a lot of work, but I think it works down the line. And so I think it's that value about transparency and trust. But the flip side, I mean, the value to me is grit. It's grit and respect.
I like this point, maybe just to sort of move to like a COVID world and as an organization, because one of the things I'm hearing all the time at the moment is the new working environment and how that's affecting companies. And you've used, a lot of words around trust, kind of conversation, communication, fairness. And now we're working in this world where people are going at home and they're working from home. So how have you found it as a tech firm going into this new distributed environment? What are your thoughts on it? And is it something that you're considering utilizing and continuing?
I think I'd start with the fact that we have been semi-distributed to begin with. I wouldn't say we were a distributed company. We had 2 offices or 3. But Nika, for instance, has largely worked remotely in Germany. I mean, sometimes it's had someone there with him, but not always. We've always had the acceptance that you can work from home. Probably I wouldn't have said originally as much as you wanted, but a few days a week. So we did have that level of trust, and therefore we had all the tooling required. So there wasn't this, some companies are obviously going through this thing where they're in a crisis because they haven't even got a thing like Slack in their company. And you need that when you work from home. So we didn't have any of these operational issues. It was it was just like working from home a lot. But I think we've actually found out it works, from our point of view, it works really well. Some people, we've even kind of sent out surveys, asked people, do you think you're more productive, less productive? And more people in the company thought they were more productive than less productive.
And as the leader, what do you think on that? Do you agree?
I think so. I think so as well. I mean, if anything, I wouldn't say too productive is not the word I'm looking for, but if anything, people have put in too many hours or are too loose with meeting times, where they say, it's almost like, I'm going to put a meeting at 7:45 because that's the only slot in the day, in the morning, where you probably wouldn't have done that before. And if people will accept it. But so it's actually, if anything, you have to make sure that people do switch off and aren't just actually, don't set your alarm for 7:40 and tell me you can do a meeting at 7:45. If you're not getting up till 7, I'm not going to ask you to change your bed alarm time to do some more work. Completely unreasonable of me. So, we've actually found that people have been very receptive and actually working too well like that, and actually trying to keep these divides between their work life and their personal life, which I think is a problem a lot of people have run into when suddenly working from home. I mean, Nick would work from home a bit more, so I think he didn't probably experience it quite as much, but suddenly for all the people who were in the office every day, discovering that there isn't this boundary between work and home and how you actually, how you do it was one of the big things we had to try and get to, I'd say.
Yeah, I think adding to that is, I think I remember that when, things started to show, in March and April that, this is going to be a problem. And we kind of moved, we said, okay, we're going to close offices. At the time, we still said, okay, we're going to hold recruitment because it is okay to work remotely because we already know each other. But we didn't feel comfortable remote onboarding, and then we kind of realized, okay, this is going to take longer. So what we're going to do, so we said, okay, we're just going to have to figure this out. And what we realized was that it works, but it's more difficult. Okay, and I think that, and I think that's the realization here. I think it is a very powerful tool, and I think that the key point about whether something works or not, if you have a digital product and digital delivery like ourselves, I think if you can manage to allow people's own preferences in terms of, whether you want to work at home or in the office or, anything in between, probably depends hugely on your home situation. Do you have kids at home? Do you have colleagues at home? Do you have flatmates? Do you have a working station, a quiet workspace? How long do you commute? Are you an introvert? Are you an extrovert? Do you spend your time with a lot of working a lot with the client, a lot with your team. So all of these things probably change not only for each person, but also for each person over time. And so I think getting that right with some boundaries must, and I think the data is already in, must have an impact on productivity, about happiness, contentness. And so I think that's going to change not only for us, but also for, work environment as a whole, for the positive. But, it's the same way. You need to find new rules. It's the same way. Just because I have a phone doesn't mean that I don't want to see my parents over Christmas. But, it's just a different way, and you need to kind of deal with it. And I think we'll find, around that. It's to me, the main point is you need to have more deliberate communication.
Yeah, deliberate communication, definitely. I mean, I find this I've asked a question of one of my previous guests one day about leading innovation workshops, and he said, is it, how do you do it in a distributed world now, post-COVID? He said, it's just, you've got to over-communicate. You've got to work really hard to find a way to communicate with each other. I've always worked in a distributed way. Headhunting is probably the ultimate distributed job in a way. It's because it's all mostly on the phone. And with the advent of video technology and the way that we communicate now, it's just continued. And I've been very fortunate to be able to maintain this distributed way of working and actually embrace the tools that we had around us, like Teams that we weren't actually using to their full effect, and all of a sudden you're kind of forced at the mother of necessity to start using them. And we found similarly, maybe to yourselves, that actually it works really well. And yes, you're right. I'm probably doing more and more meetings now than I ever was. But so there's a need definitely to monitor and manage the work-life balance and the mental health relating to that. But as a tool for selling, I'm convinced that attracting new sets of talent, other people into an industry or to work for us, distributed working is a fantastic method for that. So I'll be interested to track your thoughts, and I think actually that maybe the Insurtechs have something to teach the big incumbents on this, because I'm already seeing that they're going back to the old ways of working, maybe not embracing this opportunity as much as they could do. So I'll be interested to hear your thoughts on that. But maybe switch gears here a little bit, because I've heard so much from the two of you, and you've kind of shared so much about your experiences building a company together, working together at the company. But you are a startup, and you've had to go to the money men or women and raise cash. How do you use your relationship? Are you being judged, do you think, on the way that you two work together as co-founders, or whether or not you're going to raise funds together? Has that been your experience? And just tell us a bit about that.
Now I would say, I think whatever I say needs to be kind of put into context, that we haven't been on a fundraising spree. So, kind of taking that as a kind of disclaimer. Now, I think that if you kind of fundraise, what people are looking for, right, in the early days is can this team deliver, the next milestone of that product. And so usually you find that, you want to have single founders are more, have a higher failure rate. So you want to have two complementary founders who have a track record, and we kind of just tick the boxes. And you also don't want to have too many founders, just kind of from a statistical point of view, that the probability of fallout, the probability of not having too many cooks in a kitchen, it's just kind of counter to that. And yeah, no, I think that was certainly required, because we could deliver our product, the initial version, and we could show that we had, a history together, that we worked together, that we had a professional career before that, and all of this was relevant for starting Casco. Now that
I think, that would be the answer I would say as well. Is it really also depends on the stage, So
yeah.
When we're talking about the very first funding, the very first accelerators we got into, I mean, we're the most accelerated company on the planet, I would hazard a guess. We've probably been in about 25 different accelerators. Now, how much we took away from each one, I won't talk about right now. But we've, originally each one we applied to, that was one of our first steps, was to get into accelerators. And each one was this huge deal. And we'd be up all night, like till 4 a.m, practicing our pitches or changing things. And of course, actually, and now we just apply for accelerators for the business contacts they have. The accelerators run by a bunch of corporates in a country that we'd like to speak to. Makes sense to apply for it, but it's just the kind of admin job applying for it. And that actually, I think, applies to fundraising as well, in the sense that at the beginning, it was all about the relationship between me and Nick. The people could see not just the skill sets, but what you're seeing right now. Are they interacting in a way that you think they'll still be doing this in 4 years' time, or will they, as soon as the going gets tough, will it all fall apart? Will it all crumble when it's a harder situation it's in? I think that's what people care about. Of course, as the company moves forward and the stage moves forward, you've proven things. If you have a company and you have businesses and you have revenue and you have customers and you have a successful tech stack that people know has worked and has got a track record, you've now proven a lot more. And then the fundraising comes down to much more two other things. Does the vision make sense? Do they think you can execute on that? And it's less about, no one's going to say to us now, oh, we don't think your company could build a tech stack to Nick, because we have. We don't think you could get a customer. Well, we can.
But we did have in the very beginning, remember? That was when there was this one.
Yeah.
And then people were like, and they tried to break us apart. That was interesting. Yeah.
So what's next? I mean, this is interesting. So you kind of went through your accelerators. You've gone out and pitched yourselves. You've kind of got Casco to where it is now. What's next for Casco? What do you see in terms of the insurance market and what you're going to be solving together? Tell us about what's next for Casco.
Okay, so I guess I think what would help is where we kind of want to go to with Casco, and then what we think is kind of next in terms of our focus on the insurance customer, and then maybe for us as a company. So at Casco, our goal is to build what we call the visa of insurance. So a insurance network connecting insurers, distributors, and customers in a single network. The way a Visa or MasterCard, put merchants, acquirers, customers onto one single network. Now, what we found was because we had such big players to enter the market, the key point was to figure out how to get insurers onto this network without the network really being in existence. So what we found is pitching ourselves towards insurance companies as Insurtech as a service vendor and solving their immediate IT problems by massively reducing time and cost to market of digital products. And we've built our tech stack, a virtual insurance company, virtual MGA. Now, the second aspect of that now, and then this will never be done, right? There will always be more, but we have that pretty much sorted. This next one, and that is kind of what we've also really strong is productizing making more efficient all aspects of our delivery. So not just the technology stack, but the tooling of our technology. So we can do the same thing quicker, better quality, etc. The delivery aspect of it, that we can remotely deliver complex projects without having to be on site. And, what we've discussed in the beginning, our delivery, our sales model, which is, rapid consultation, productization of their problems. Now, and that's kind of where we are right now. Now, the next stage, and this is something that we've been working on, which has been decelerated because of we were planning on doing a round pre-COVID to accelerate this, is opening our tools, self-service, what we call them, but opening our development tools to external developers for three reasons. One, we can outsource ourselves because currently there is a capacity constraint on how many things we can do at the same time. If we can outsource this, we can remove that capacity constraint and just deliver more. But more importantly, we can also allow insurers to manage and take over this part, but also IT vendors, IT consultants, resellers, taking our technology and putting it to the market to really scale this up. And I would say that's kind of our next stage of where we need to go. And for us, what's next in order to do this is two things. One, we need to position ourselves into an acceleration mode to be very attractive for external funding at valuations that we like to accept. And there's really, because that's, I mean, we can raise funds. And there's really two things we need to do for this. Number one, we need to show 100% growth on a 1-2 year time frame. So we're investing heavily on sales to do this organically with our current funds, and to deploy the self-service in its first version. And we're doing that as well. And that's kind of what we're doing the same as before, more efficiently, whilst carving out resources to build the self-service to then really have a step change in our model. What that means to us as a company, we continued hiring. It's investing heavily into sales and this process, and becoming ever better at it. But it as a company, it just means to be really razor focused on getting these goals, because there's also no lifeline. There's no, the advent of cheap fintech money, I think, is kind of over. If you see some down rounds that are happening there. So that's kind of what's in it for us. More of the same, faster, better, with a clear goal of getting a step change once we've hit these goals, to kind of prove. Because I don't want to tell people I believe this is happening. I'm happy to prove it to them. And, if anyone asks us, what's different at Casco, say, just look at my traction. Tell me another company with that level of resources that has been able to get all these companies onto this single instance. Name me one company. I haven't seen them. So just look at that. And we're happy to put our money where our mouth is.
Thank you. Matt, any to add to that?
No, I mean, I think that was a great answer. I'm not gonna.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So what? I mean, if you let's finishing up now with the interview. I mean, if people here are going to be listening to you, who are maybe legacy insurers or are other insurtechs or interested parties, just tell us, maybe if they want to reach out, maybe where they can find you, and also maybe the sort of people that you're interested in talking to. So the types of people you like to talk to and how they can reach you.
So, I mean, you can reach us, we have a website, www.casco.io. Reach us on LinkedIn. Happy, reach me on my email, nsuehr@casco.io. And, you can find Matt on LinkedIn, and, his email, Wardle@casco.io. Pretty much, we like to talk to anyone within an insurance company, an MGA, a broker, or any other large brand that is distributing insurance, banks, etc. If you find yourself in a situation where you see several opportunities around creating digital processes, digital products towards your customers, and you lack the IT resources to put these in place in a timely manner. Usually those are, product managers, distribution managers within insurance companies, but increasingly also, digital transformation managers, CIOs. So come talk to us. We're happy to share war stories, listen to your particular situation and how we might help, and just learn from each other.
Matt, I think you also have, as a CTO, if any other CTOs are out there that are listening to this, are they? Would you like to hear from them, have a chat with them as well?
Yeah, absolutely. These are conversations that we're actually kind of constantly having with people. A conversation with people about how they're doing things and how they should do things and how we should do things, and these kind of conversations. And, as Nick touched on as well, also anyone within the technology space within insurance companies who'd be interested in speaking about how we're doing things versus, and it's not to say, speak to us and we'll try and sell you our platform. It's, to say they're happy to have a chat with us. Maybe we can just tell them some things and they'll find that something they want to implement themselves.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, guys. Well, thank you very much for your time, Matt, Nick from Casco.io. I really appreciate hearing your lessons and your experiences in growing a business and the culture of establishing an Insurtech that's delivering really innovative solutions to industry. The way that you guys have worked together and the culture that you've built in working together, I'm sure we can learn a lot from that, and all of the other experiences you've shared in between. So thank you very much for coming on the show.
William, thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.